Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
And my name is Dan.
and it feels really weird doing this like 5 minutes after we finished recording this one. Um, but yeah, we are back to record part two of our season preview, part two of three, looking at the next 8 teams. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you've already listened to part one. Otherwise, I have some questions about your listening process in all of this. Um, Dan, in the nicest possible way, I'm not going to ask how you're doing this time because I've already done that.
That's fine. I'm
and
doing well though, Angus.
I think we'll just sort of jump into the next set of teams. Um, so similar format, and you'll notice similar, roughly sort of ascending order up the table or up the projected table. The first one um, is Portsmouth, another one of the promoted teams. Thank you to Rory, who provided us with the information for this. In terms of key outgoings, you said Sean Raggett, who started at centre back, played over 200 games for them. Abu Kamara, who was on loan with them from Norwich last season. Joe Morrell, who started in centre back for the past few seasons, missed the end of last season with injury, hasn't been replaced yet. They said incomings, Jordan Williams, right back from Barnsley, Josh Murphy from Oxford. I would say since this, um, they did add, well, they had at the time added Sammy Silvera. We'll come on to Jacob Farrell, left back. Elias Sorensen from Denmark, who got a lot of goals and assists in Denmark last season. Has also been signed, and it's worth noting everyone's initial favourite 4.0 defender, Sparks,
Sad times.
has left. Um, so under likely lineup and formation, it said under Mourinho we've always set up in a 4-2-3-1, occasionally switching to a 5-2-2-1 to see out games. In terms of a rough predicted lineup, he said Norris in goal, Williams at right back, Shaughnessy and McIntyre at centre back, Ogilvie at left back, Hack and Lowry in midfield, Paddy Lane on the right, Silvera as the attacking midfielder, Josh Murphy on the left, and Yengi up front. So initial thoughts there, Dan.
Obviously, Portsmouth won the league. I think that they've done some okay business. I think I maybe thought they'd done a little bit more. But I do like if they get the Josh Murphy that played for about 3 months at the end of last season and the one that scored worldies in the playoff final, then that's a great signing. Sammy Silvera, I think, showed a lot of potential. It feels right for Middlesbrough to maybe loan him out to Pompey where he will get more game time. Sorensen, the striker, who will be coming in at 6 million, I think. I don't know too much about him, but with the news about Colby Bishop having a heart defect during pre-season tests, so glad they found that. Having experienced what Lockyer went through, no Bishop's going to be a big blow, but there's some players in here I think could step up to the championship. Yengi up front is someone I know is very highly rated. So yeah, overall a great addition to the league. A long time away. Maybe a little bit disappointed with their business.
Yeah. Well, in terms of some of those assets, though, um, Rory's listed a few of them as sort of assets. So Will Norris, just in terms of consistent
Yeah,
starter. Um, Shaughnessy, uh, he says he's a beast of a centre back. Loves to score headers from set pieces too. Josh Murphy, new winger who was great for Oxford late last season. Paddy Lane, who's another winger he's getting better each season. And Yengi, who's the starting striker, who has all the attributes to be a top championship forward. Obviously, that might change with Sorensen coming in, but see. Uh, Budget assets, most of the starters are decent assets as they're all cheap. He says if Regan Poole stays fit, he'd be a great pickup as he's cheap, consistent and play pretty much all the games. He said under the radar, Jacob Farrell has recently come in from Australia and is a very exciting young left back. If he gets a run of games, likely further into the season, you can see him doing very well. He said they were also about to sign Elias Sorensen, who got a lot of goals in Denmark last season and looks an exciting player. He also added the note of Colby Bishop. He's going to be out for a while after needing heart surgery, which, as you say, main thing is that they caught it beforehand, but it's probably caused a little bit of a pivot being necessary from them. Um, so yes, that's sort of everything else I just said. He has predicted that they will finish 16th, which I think, not unreasonable to make this sort of
no,
prediction. I think it is, we've talked with a number of teams, it's quite condensed lower down the
yeah,
table, and it's the sort of position that a lot of these teams should be aspiring to. Um, but yeah, what are your thoughts on any of those assets or anyone else that you might want to cover?
yeah. I think I sort of briefly covered it. I think they're probably a wait and see. Um, I do think they might have some options. Pack, if he continues to be on a lot of set pieces, I'm not could be okay. With how I think they'll do, I think he's probably got it about right with 16th. Like I said, I'd like to, if they sign a couple more, I think they'll easily stay up. As in, they'll be about 16th. So yeah, I might just have them a touch bit lower, but yeah, I don't think they'll go down.
And in terms of people looking to start the season with Portsmouth, I'm just going to read out their opening fixtures because we covered it, I think, on the initial part. But I think it's just worth bearing in mind, particularly as you're saying, in terms of particularly maybe a wait and see element on how they're going to play and who's going to be. They start the season Leeds away, Luton at home, Middlesbrough away, Sunderland at home, West Brom at home, Burnley away, Sheffield United at home.
That's bad. If they get a point per game, they've done well.
Yeah,
I hope they don't panic and sack Mousinho. They need to just basically these are all free hits
yeah,
and then get as many points as you can. If like I said, if they get about a point per game, they'll put them in a decent place to attack the next set of fixtures. So yeah, definitely a wait and see.
yeah. I think that's just the thing is like if you're in terms of some teams that you're sort of more a wait and see or trying to narrow down your options. I think initially that gives you the sort of thing of like initially Portsmouth can probably be off your radar. Um, but yeah, so that's them, and I do think they're an interesting addition. The next one we've got, I don't think we have any response for, so we'll have to sort of do our best to cobble it together. Is Plymouth? Um, Obviously probably the biggest addition, Wayne Rooney. Um, I do think he gets a little bit more stick than he deserves. I think his managerial career to date has been a little bit weird, which has not all been sort of his fault. Um, you had the Derby stint, which I think he did quite well to just hold that together. Um, there was DC United, which can't read anything into that really. Apparently, he did better than like would have been expected, but I couldn't comment on that. Birmingham thing, I think he was given a little bit of a hospital pass, was sold a long-term job and was got rid of quickly. So it'll be interesting to see. I think it feeds into, in a lot of ways, what they were like under Schumacher in the first part of the season. Rooney, another manager who wants his team to be on the front foot, um, sort of attacking, and so I do think they could be an interesting team this season. In terms of other additions, there's Ogbeta, um, but sort of primarily fullback, can also play centre back. Um, Ibrahim Sissoko, who we covered at length on our sort of intro pod, who they brought in, who will play on the wing. Um, Tijani is an option up front, probably to compete with Ryan Hardy. Um, Carlson, who is defender. Um, I forget where they brought him in from, to be honest. Um, Anyone else that I'm forgetting on Plymouth in terms of notable additions or departures?
Um, they got Gaebi, the Leeds
Oh,
centre mid back.
yeah, Gayabi. They kept him, didn't they?
Yeah, I think he'll suit the way Rooney wants to play a bit more than.
Oh, in terms of departures, I've just thought Dan Scarr has gone to Wrexham,
Yeah,
who I think played quite a bit for them last season.
yeah. I'm not sure if he suits the way Rooney wants to play, and with some of
And
the
Mikel Miller left as well on a free.
yeah. So whether Plymouth are interesting, whether they're as strong as the first half of the season when you had Azaz and Kundal, I'm not sure, but I think they've definitely looked like they're signing players with a bit more pace and power to get up and down the pitch. I think with a better who done well at the end of last season in League One, and as you mentioned, Sissoko as well. So yeah, they're a hard one, aren't they, Plymouth? Because it feels like it's going to be massively dependent on Rooney, where I'm not sure that's strictly going to be the case.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of turnover, but I do think it sort of mainly depends on yeah, how are they going to play sort of when it comes down to it.
It might
Um,
actually come down to can they keep Cooper and Whittaker.
yeah, I know there's a lot of talk on Cooper in particular around Sheffield United. Um, I'm just trying to think. Whittaker, it comes and goes a little bit in terms of interest in him.
Yeah,
Um,
I wonder if he did sign like a long term deal. That's going to have to be a serious amount of money, I think.
I'd seen that they were quoting, because obviously Rangers have been after him again. I've seen that they were quoting roughly £10 million for him, which wouldn't necessarily put some teams off, but it is still a significant sum of money for a lot of
Yeah.
teams to come up with, particularly non-Premier League teams.
Mm.
Um, so that might sort of help them keep a hold of him. Um, while also being reasonable enough that it wouldn't affect the players' morale in any way. Um, so yeah, that's um, that's what the main thing on comings and outgoings in terms of potential lineups.
It's Cooper in goal if he stays.
Yeah, it's Cooper or Hazard. I think we're probably looking at better on the left-hand side of the defence.
Perhaps, yeah. Do you
Um,
reckon Mumble on the right?
that's sort of what I'm guessing at the moment.
I
It's
think I
obviously
think it's going to be 4. I think.
yeah, it's a little bit tough to get a read, but I do think the most likely feels like Mumba on the right and better on the left. Um, Not 100% sure. I mean, I would assume Gibson plays centre back,
Yeah, and I'm guessing it'll
probably with
be.
Powelson, but
Yeah, I think Powson might have played at right back today. I don't know. It's a bit tricky, to be
yeah,
honest.
it's a bit
I don't
tricky
want to
trying to
say,
work out who sort of played where. I know Powelson's primarily a centre back who can play on the right hand side, but
but I
um,
wonder if Rooney's going to try like sending one wing back all the way up.
yeah. Um, in midfield, I think they played Randall and Houghton. Obviously, you mentioned Giabi, who could play in there.
Yeah,
Um, they played Whitaker, um, Isaka,
Tijani and
Sissoko, and
Sissoko.
Tijani. So, like, it's somewhere between probably a 4-2-4, a 4-2-3-1. Um,
They haven't tried something crazy like Sissoko right wing back or something in that, have they?
no, I think Sissoko is very much sort of on the left hand side. I think it seems certainly that it'll be Sissoko left and Whitaker right. That's sort of what I would expect, but how exactly it all fits together because they seem to be playing multiple strikers every game, whether
Yeah,
it's Hijani, Isaka, Bundu, Hardy. So I'm not sure on Plymouth how they're lining up. If anyone is listening and is a Plymouth fan and
yeah.
can
Please
clarify, that
contact.
would be incredible. Because we are sort of doing our best to guess at it at the moment. Um, but I think it does make some players very interesting options.
Yeah,
Um,
I think whoever plays fullbacks could be interesting.
yeah,
Or better, Mumba, who's at point 0.5 more. Those two would be the main ones defensively, I think. Yeah, Sissoko
yeah,
is gonna be popular, and then Morgan Whittaker, I think, as well. Even though at 8 million, maybe better options to start with, but yeah, if he gets back to anywhere near the form of the first half of the season, he's going to put his hand up as an option.
yeah. And I do think the striker thing being unclear or so far where they've used multiple options isn't ideal, but I am still a fan of Ryan Hardy. I think he's a very solid option, particularly in that 6 million range.
Yeah, it's
Um,
just like I said, if he's not nailed, then
yeah,
it's you're going to have other players at 6 million you're going to want to punt on. But yeah, yeah, I don't know with Plymouth. If I'm honest, I think they're going to be near the bottom. I do think Rooney having a pre-season is a massive factor for him, and I hope he does well because let's be honest, he could have just that's it. I'm not coming back into management again. He's moved completely down the other end of the country, so he's taking it seriously. And let's be honest, if he fails this time, it's you're not getting another championship job. I don't think.
probably not, especially with this one. We do have to factor in, while I think he deserved another shot at it, it's, people who knew him from Everton who have brought him in to do the job and everything. Like, is someone going to be willing to give him another job?
Yeah,
I'm not so sure. Um, but I do think there are interesting options there. I'm going to obviously say Sissoko is the best one to go with because I'm just, driving the Sissoko bandwagon. Uh, Whitaker, I do like I say, I think Hardy primarily, but if a striker becomes clear, I think they have the interesting options there that if one of them clearly becomes the main guy, whether it's sort of him, whether it's Tijani, who I think could be very interesting, particularly in a team you would expect to be looking to score goals. Um, in terms of the finishing position, I think just because there's a lot of good teams in the division, I think it would be tough.
yeah,
Um, I think they could do better than a lot of people are expecting, but like I'm talking about them finishing sort of like 17th rather
yeah.
than
So
really making a push up the
yeah,
table.
I think we're on. We feel similar about Plymouth.
Um, but yeah, sorry, that's a little bit of a fumbled one. It's one of those that is a little bit tougher, both when we're often trying to rely on information from fans, but also just that little bit of clarity missing on how exactly they're playing. But I'm looking forward to seeing more of them again this year. Actually,
Yeah,
I think they've got some very interesting players there. And the next one we've got is Sunderland, which is one that you've got down.
yeah. So I asked Spencer, FPL Beery, key outgoings. I don't think they had any. Is Bradley Dack a key outgoing?
I mean,
I'm
he's
not
now
sure.
going.
Yeah. Spencer has said that Clark and Hume have been rumoured to leave in. Key Cummins, the new manager, Reggie Labrie, I think it is. He did say good luck with the pronunciation, so he knows we, we sometimes struggle. Alan Brown, I think this could be a very underrated signing when you consider of Sunderland have predominantly recruited youngsters with a lot of potential. Getting in Brown, who is an established Championship player, one of Preston's consistent players for a number of years. I think he was a one man club. I think he actually came through the academy. So I know Preston, they basically offered him the highest contract to stay, and he turned them down for Sunderland. So that's a big gap. Simon Moore, I think he's going to come back as a backup to Patterson, but we saw a couple of seasons ago he was number one choice for Coventry. And Ian Paveda, who for a long period of time has had flashes of doing well in this league. I think he put himself in the shop window at Sheffield Wednesday. I think a number of clubs were wanting him, so I think Paveda could be a good option. What did you think of the transfers, Angus, before I get onto the information about formation?
Yeah, I think the other thing that's smart about a number of these additions is it feels like they've also covered themselves against potential departures. Like Paveda covers them if they lose one of the attackers. Brown's similar, particularly I think when there was the whole thing about Joe Bellingham potentially leaving in terms of just having another solid option. You're obviously not necessarily going to fill that, but just in terms of covering off departures, um, they could still do with a striker. I feel like we've been saying that for a while with Sunderland. They could still do with a striker, but yeah, I think there's been some decent additions in there.
So Spencer says it's going to be a 4-3-3 DM and two box-to-box mids, or 4-4-2. He says, I prefer the 4-4-2 due to our strikers being an expletive shit. Hopefully we sign one and gives Bellingham a chance to push forward, potentially OOP. Also takes pressure off players like Roberts, who can be hit and miss. but he thinks the manager prefers 4-3-3 though, with Joe back at left centre mid, Neil Holding and Brown centre mid, right centre mid. Ekwa's been injured. So yeah, he did do the full lineup of Patterson in goal, Hume, O'Nien, Ballard when he's fit, but he's injured, so at least he thinks will play at centre back. Kirkin at left back. Neil, he thinks Neil, Ekwa, and he said, sorry, Ekwa or Brown and Job will play as well, and then a front three of the Roberts on the right, Clark on the left, and he's just put a striker. I think he's just begging for any striker to come in. So with that formation, Angus, any real surprises? I don't think so.
Not really, no. I think most of that is what we would probably expect at this point.
Yeah. Okay. So he said key assets. Clark, for obvious reasons. His first of the season was ridiculous. Joe Bellingham, I think he's 7 million this year, so that's a decent option. And he's then put Sirkin, and he said praise he stays fit, because he thinks obviously with Jack Clark and Sirkin, a lot of it goes down the left side, so they can link up well. Budget assets, he said a striker, he's put Mendy if he signs. He said all the other mids other than Clark are reasonable price, and he thinks if Clark goes, then maybe Mundell starts at a cheap price. He says he's got a soft spot for Adil Ayanouchi, could start in the box-to-box midfielder spot. But yeah. And under the radar, Patterson as set and forget keeper. Yeah. He said avoid 09. So yeah, anything? I'm guessing first place to start Patterson, one of these 5 million goalies, Angus. I think Sunderland's actual defensive numbers were pretty good last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think Patterson, it's another one in the 5.0 category that I think people are going to be increasingly looking at. Who like can be considered. I've been a big fan of Trey Hume in the past. He has had that price bump that makes it almost a little bit tougher. Clark, Roberts, but I like that Spencer mentioned Al-Shish. I do think he's an interesting one. I think he has
So
taken some.
I butchered it then, did I?
It,
What did I call it? Ouchie.
just a touch. I think he took a penalty in their friendly today. Not to, but obviously if Jack Clark's on the pitch, then that's not going to happen. But I think he did well when he was on the pitch. But yeah, I think there's a few options there that I do think are interesting. Just one on Jack Clark, just to paint a picture for people, because I did work this out. Is that over his 40 games last season, 39 of which were starts, so even including one appearance off the bench, he averaged 2.8 bonus points per game.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Basically, he steps on the pitch and gets bonus.
Yeah, he basically starts a game. But any game he played last season, I mean, I know there's the one bench game, he was starting the game on 4.8 points.
That's ridiculous,
on average. So, when you, particularly for those who are new to the game, when you hear us really talking up people like Jack Clark, it's not just the attacking returns that he's capable of. It is particularly that bonus, which is so key with him.
Yeah, I agree. Let me just find out when. He goes finish in position, hope for top 6. probably finish just outside mid-table without a striker who can score. I think that a lot of people seem to be higher on Sunderland, and I know they haven't lost any players, so I can see why. And also, when the last few months was basically a car crash, they basically were just waiting for the season to finish. So yeah, I can definitely see him finishing top half and maybe pushing the playoffs if they keep Jack Clark though.
It just becomes tough if you lose a player like that
Yeah,
for anyone. See what we said in the first episode about Norwich and Sarah. Um, but yeah, so just looking ahead on that, the next team we've got is Swansea. Thank you to Lewis Turner, who gave us quite a bit on this. So he did start off what he was saying on this by saying, I'm hoping that what I say here will be a lot different by deadline, but I'm not optimistic with these owners. So that's a good note to start on. There's not been too much in terms of outgoings, he said, although obviously Rushworth, who was on loan last season, who was obviously very good for them, not being able to get him back was disappointing. Wood left, who was wanted out for best part of a year. Yates, um, who it didn't work, but as Lewis points out, was their only striker. So it was a bit of a strange one to loan him out. And Patterson, uh, whose contract expired, and I'm not sure there's been a great deal of clarity on his situation going forward.
he's not
Um,
signed, I don't think.
no, but he's not signed with anyone.
Yeah,
In terms of incomings, they've been slow. They've signed Eom from South Korea, um, who can play as a left winger or an attacking midfielder. He says he may take a while to get up to speed, but he thinks he could be a gem. He said he's also really excited by Franco, central midfielder, um, that and they've obviously been in real need of another central midfielder basically since Flynn Downs left.
yeah.
Um, he said he had the most interceptions in Portugal last season, um, which is, I believe, one of the things that feeds into defensive actions in the Gaffr bonus system. So who knows that he might be an interesting one there. A new keeper is Vigouroux, who played under Williams at Leyton Orient and looks great on the ball, but hasn't played, which suits them, but hasn't played at higher than League Two for the last year. Um, he also said they still need a couple of at least two strikers, a couple of wingers, and a centre back. I think
They
since
signed a
he said
striker.
that they signed a striker. Um, he did
Vic,
message me when they signed a striker saying, "Oh, we've signed a striker and we're now going up." So, um, but yeah. So in terms of a little bit there, um, he's then gone through sort of some of the stuff with the team. So he said Vigouroux will start. Key, Darling, Cabango, and Timon be the back line barring injuries. He then thinks Grimes and Franco should be the midfield pairing. Williams has mentioned a couple of formations which he thinks is new signings pending, but he is hoping it will be Abdullahi completing a midfield three, um, and then Eom or Ginelli, which is fitness decision, and Ronald on the wings, and then a striker obviously up top. Um, I'm just trying to remember who it is that they have signed, and it's completely skipped my mind.
It's Vic Opnik.
That's it. Um, and then he's also hoping for a new attacking midfielder or Patterson back instead of Abdullahi. for a bit more of an attacking presence. So that's sort of in terms of the lineup. Before we get to some of the assets, what are your thoughts on what is there in terms of sort of incomings, outgoings lineup with Swansea?
Yeah, I think it looks pretty solid, doesn't it? Defence. I know at times people were interested with Key. Timon has done well when he can stay fit. They're both 5 millions. They were pretty poor defensively. So you can get on their centre backs at 4.5. Darlings can just go on these mazy runs and then he smacks them in, or he's a threat from set pieces. Midfield, I don't know that much about Eon, but he's 5.5. So that could be a nice budget option. You got Ronaldo on 6.5, who had flashes last year where he looked like he could be a good player. And then up front, the new striker who's going to be coming in at 6.5. So, yeah, the Swansea are going to play attacking football because that's how they want to play. So if they are as attacking as we think they are, then maybe the midfielders or the striker options, most expensive one is 6.5, could be nice options throughout.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of some of those assets, he said the key assets are one of Eeyore Timon, defence, both given a lot of allowance to attack, especially if they play three in midfield. Um, Ronald is a good price at 6.5, but he did note that he hasn't played much in pre-season, which is a bit of a concern. Um, he also thinks that Eon at 5.5 will be massively underpriced by the end of the season, which will be interesting to sort of keep an eye on. He said he's been described as a Son-esque player, which, if you're getting that sort of comparison, will obviously sort of get people to sit up and pay attention. Um, but he does think it may take him a while to get up to speed, so it may be one to sort of wait and see. And it says, honestly, wouldn't even consider anyone else. Darling is decent in the air, so it could be if you need a budget defender at 4.5. He also said at the moment, as said, it's all about the rest of the transfer window. Two strikers are vital, otherwise I worry about a potential dead season at around 15th, 16th. Strong rest of the window and can hope for a top half finish.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to really know with Swansea. I think they've done some okay business. If they sell, then they could probably push towards mid-table. We'll see. I haven't really thought about any of them. Have you thought about the goalie? Oh, he's 5 million, isn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I'm not
here's
sure.
another
He was
one
at Burnley,
in
wasn't
the 5 million because he was at Burnley. Um, so not massively. I like their the fullbacks. You know, but I did go key early last season. Didn't really work for me. Um, and then obviously there's Ronald as well, who did do well last season. But I think early on, particularly with sort of opening up with Middlesbrough away, I probably won't be starting with them, and then sort of see how I feel on them as it goes along. But I do think they've got a few players who could be interesting, particularly at the right time.
he? Yeah, I think that's fair.
So that's sort of everything we've got on Swansea. The next team we've got is coming to you, Dan, which is Preston.
Yeah, so I got the information from Steve. It's quite nice to get Preston. It's normally one of the teams we struggle with. He said key incomings two so far. Sam Greenwood, who on loan from He's on loan from Leeds. I think they have an option to buy. Was obviously at Middlesbrough last year. And Stefan Thorardson. Outgoings Liam Miller, who made quite a big impact for them, and obviously Alan Brown, who was their captain. So I'm not sure fantasy wise whether that'll be a big loss, but just as a whole for Preston, that could be. He said likely line up 3-4-2-1 or 5-3-2. He didn't give the actual lineup, but he sort of, so I guess it'll be. I'll quickly guess it. It'll be Woodman in goal. At the minute, it'll be Potts at right wing back. Although I know the fans want proper wing backs, but both right wing back and left wing back. Centre backs, I think it will be Hughes, Lindsay, and probably Story, with Brady left wing back. Centre mid will be Thorardson and Whiteman, and I think they'll have Frockier, Jensen, and Greenwood probably behind Emil Rees. Does that sound about right?
I think so. Then you've got options, whether it's particularly as he said, where it might be a front two at times, where
Yeah,
someone
Keane.
like Keane or Asmajic can come into the team as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so he then said the best asset is Frockier Jensen. I think that's fair too,
Yeah.
because at times he was very good. He said budget asset could be Dwayne Holmes if he gets a start. We saw last year went on a fairly decent run, and he thinks under the radar could be Brad Potts, which I think is fair if they. He normally plays, doesn't he, Brad
Yeah.
Potts? So yeah, and any of those Angus made your game week one drafts?
Not at the moment, but they're a team that's always sort of interest. I actually did reasonably well last season with Preston players, bringing them in. Frockier Jensen was one of them. Lindsay did a really nice job for me as well last season, um, which was a little bit of a rogue one, but he actually went quite well for me. And Woodman, I guess, has to be thrown into the mix as another one of the 5 million
Yeah,
keepers. The main issue for me in terms of starting with them is just like that first five. If you can get them to rotate, then they have a nice couple of games, but they play Sheffield United in one, Luton in three, and Borough in five. So,
yes,
um,
yeah, maybe like a defender, but
but yeah, I mean, there's always the potential, particularly seeing how they match up with teams. You know, never far away from. Well, maybe I am, but other people never far away from talking themselves into Robbie Brady, for example.
normally does well for bonus, doesn't he? If
Yeah,
he doesn't get booked. So yeah, Stephen reckons 11th or 12th again, which I know Angus you're going to pick. I'm a little bit more worried about Preston, and I know you're going to say it's Preston. They're going to finish mid-table, but their run in the second half of the season, they were basically relegation form. And I know Preston are normally safe, so it doesn't really matter. But I do think Lowe is at the stage where this is it this season. I know he's not always been helped in the market. I know he wants wing backs, but the fans seem very on the fence with him, and I do wonder if it starts off poorly, whether they. I'm not saying they'll go down, but whether they might need like a rescue job from someone, and then they maybe drop down a bit. But yeah, it's. I'm saying all this, and they'll be 11th to 13th, won't they?
Yeah, they're 12th. They're
Yeah.
Preston. They're 12th. Uh, no, I think they've probably got just enough to end up in that range, but probably not quite enough to end up any higher.
So do you think they're more likely to push towards the playoffs or finish 15th, 16th, 17th?
I would probably, yeah, I'd probably be expecting slightly more of them to drop down to
Yeah.
say 16.
This mid-table feels very, very competitive, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Um, but yeah, I think there's still some interesting options there. Um, I'm not going to do quite as much sort of slating of Preston as I normally do before the season starts. Um, so the next one we've got is Coventry, which I think is, we're getting into some really interesting ones now. Um, and this is from Brett, FPL Shake and Bake. Um, and so he has said, in terms of the key outgoings for Coventry, Callum O'Hare has obviously gone to uh, Sheffield United, Matt Godden and Liam Kelly. And then the incomings, Oliver Dobbin, Jack Redoni, Rafael Borges Rodriguez, Lewis Binks, and Efron Mason Clark. Now, obviously, Mason Clark, I think they signed in January, loaned back. He's now joined. Binks has obviously been brought back in. He said the likely lineup information, he said 4-3-3. He said Dovin in goal, Van Everyk at right back, Thomas and Binks at centre back, Bidwell at left back, Sheaf, Eccles and Rudoni in midfield, Wright and Sakamoto either side of Sims. Um, yeah, before we get into the assets, any sort of thoughts initially on that with Coventry?
Yeah, pretty similar to Borough in terms they had the rebuild last year, losing Gus Hamer and Victor Gyökeres. It was always going to be a rebuild. They were massively dependent on those two. I then think they've used the money wisely. They've got a lot more squad depth, whether that's last year or this year. And similar to Borough, I'll be disappointed if they don't finish in the top six. I think there's loads of options throughout the team. Van Eyck at right back. I'm not sure he's going to play quite as much as a winger as we got last year, but he's going to be attacking, I think, especially with Bidwell. I do wonder if there'll be more of a bias towards the right side. 6 million though, so it's one of the premium defenders. Like I mentioned, I think Ben Sheaf is probably the best centre mid in the league. 6 million, I'm not sure if he's really an option. Eccles always goes a bit under the radar, but sometimes he's on like set pieces and things like that. So he's not terrible at 6. I know Radoni's been doing really well in pre-season. I've liked him as a player. I think he joined a very, very bad Huddersfield side. And for him to, at times, stand out shows his level. He's now playing with a lot better players, so you'd expect his levels will improve. He's still quite young. 6.5 could be a really, really nice price. And then I'll leave some for you, Angus. I will mention the two strikers. Although Wright will play off the left, I think I'm not sure if he's going to be fully fit for game week 1. And you've got Sims in the middle. They definitely massively improved in the second half of the season from their goal output. If they don't go too far in the FA Cup, I think they've got a chance of top six. So yeah. Anyone else, Angus? I know I basically said them all, but
Yeah, no, I'm just looking at what sort of Brett said in terms of some of the asset thoughts. I think there are a few of them that you've covered. I think Sims and Wright, in terms of the best assets, he said there's hard to split the two. Wright has penalties, but there's also greater likelihood of rotation with Mason Clark, whereas Sims should play the majority of minutes through the middle. Both started slowly last year but ended strongly. As someone who made the prediction in multiple places that Ellis Sims was going to win the Golden Boot, I did at least feel less stupid by the end of the season.
it might be worth to note that they did sign Thomas Asante as well.
Yes, of course, since this. So I would assume that's mainly to have sort of another option there, but Sims obviously would still be the main one. Um, he said in terms of like the budget assets or more budget assets, he said Jack Rodoni, and saying he looks to take on the mantle of as chief playmaker, and has also impressed in pre-season, but so far, and seems to be on a lot of the set pieces. And he predicted them to finish fourth, which I think is fair.
That's fair,
Um,
yeah.
I like a lot of their players. I feel like one that hasn't really been mentioned is your man Sakamoto.
Yeah, was he in the lineup? Was he?
Um,
I can't remember. I think he was. Sorry, my mind's gone a bit blank.
yes,
Yeah, I like Sakamoto. Obviously, had the injury, didn't he, at the end of the season? But yeah, it was a shame. He was just starting to settle in. I think he's learnt the language a bit more. So yeah, definitely, they've got so many attacking options. If they can keep the defence solid, they're going to be right up there, I think.
yeah, and I think they're options to consider right the way through. I mean, when I made my first draft, Haji Wright was in there. He has now come out of the draft
Yeah.
just because of the fitness in pre-season, but certainly by the time of game week one, wouldn't surprise me if him or Sims is in there. Um, really like them. So and then as you said, not big fan of Rodoni as well as a player. Maybe someone like him, but I think it'll be looking at probably more of the explicitly attacking players. So the likes of Sakamoto, Wright, Sims, etc. And yeah, I think predicting them for fourth is very fair at this point in time. Um, so I think we've got a couple of big boys to finish this pod. Um, the first one being Leeds, which we're coming to you, Dan.
Yeah, so we sort of had a key outgoing today, which
Yeah,
is Somerville. So we've lost the most expensive player in the game. I don't think it was a massive surprise. Just makes it a lot more easier to get the players we want. Archie Gray's gone, great talent. Got that move to Tottenham. So yeah, Kamara's gone as well. They lost a few of the fringe players, and some of their loans went back. Key incomings, they've got Rodon on a permanent. Bogle, I think they paid 5-6 million from Sheffield United in his last year. They never really had a right back they could, an out and out right back they could trust. They had Spence in the first half, Roberts in the second, and in the end, Archie Gray kept that position. And they've signed Rothwell as well, who we've seen he'll get goals and assists in the Championship. He'll tick over. They have got a couple of loan players have come back in, so Brennan Harrison and Voba, who's a centre back. So yeah, it's added a bit more depth to what they had. Jordan reckons the lineup will be a 4-2-3-1. Meslier in goal, Bogle right back, Roden and Stoik at centre back with Firpo at left back, and Padu and Gruev in centre mid. He did have Somerville, so I'm pretty sure that'll become Dan James unless they sign someone. Rutter in the 10, Nonto on the right, and Piero up front. Although there's a lot of noise around Matteo Joseph. He was high rated. He got some minutes towards the end of last season. 7 million. So if he gets in playing up front for Leeds, he's going to be a great option. What do you think about the lineup? They've lost a couple of key players, but overall, it's still strong, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think we had a big question in pricing terms about Ampadu being a defender or midfielder, and I was adamant he was going
Yeah,
to. I mean, that lineup is almost exactly what I said. I mean, I didn't necessarily expect Kamara to be sold, but that Roden and Strout would play centre back and Ampadu would step into midfield with Gruev. Yeah, it's very strong. Even someone like Dan James coming in. I mean, I had Dan James for a while last season, and he was a great option in Gaffr as well. But like that's still a quality option that you're bringing into the team, even if they don't sign a replacement, which you would expect them to.
yeah, I agree. We've mentioned Matteo Joseph, Joel Piero. They've still got Bamford there. I don't think they'll sign another out and out striker. I think they do want to see Joseph maybe break through. I do wonder if Rutter can step up another level. I think he's going to stay now. You've sold Somerville, Gray's gone as well. They spent 30 million on Rutter. That feels like he's going to be here for at least one more season. So yeah, I would keep an eye out though from the last friendlies. Apparently Rutter's been playing on the left at times. Harrison can play in the 10. So although that seems like the most natural lineup, I do wonder if maybe the first couple of game weeks it's a bit different while they're getting things sorted. But yeah, fantasy wise, I mean, you can pretty much go fullbacks, Bogle or Firpo. Like I said, the wingers will be good. Rutter, if Joseph gets in the side, well, that's going to be basically a 14-team game. But yeah, with their squad, it has to be top two, and they're going to add to it in the next month or so.
Yeah, I think so. As you say, I think you can take options throughout the team, and like you say, I think they'll add. I think there's potential to add one within the division, which would be interesting. And I think they could add from outside the division as well. They've now got a significant chunk of money to spend just across
Yeah,
the sales. In terms of it has balanced their books from previous, but it does mean that they can sort of invest a bit now. Um, yeah, I mean, I think they were reasonable favourites to win the division. Obviously, Somerville going affects that, but I think they do have enough quality that it's still very viable to say that about them.
they also felt like they sorted out their business early, as in they knew which players were coming back into the squad. They've got rid of the players who, again, on loan or sales. Archie Gray, I know it was probably an FFP thing, but he was gone early. Somerville's gone. I know it's only a week before the season, but there's no need for them to panic. Like, they've still got the depth for the first month or so of the season. So yeah, and they got 90 points, did they, last year, roughly?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's basically it's all pointing for them, but It's the Championship and it's Leeds, so you never know.
Yeah, I think they'll be popular from the outset, and they'll be sort of key features of people's teams throughout.
Yep.
But yeah, and so to move on to the final team of this pod um, is Burnley, another team we'd expect to be up there. Um, I, it's another one that I only have, unfortunately, by their sort of Slack username from Planet FPL Slack, but it's Chris UTC. So Chris has given us the Burnley info. In terms of key outgoings, he said basically all the goalkeepers.
Yeah.
So Muric has gone to Ipswich, Vigouroux has gone to Swansea, Peacock Farrell's gone to Birmingham. Trafford is still here, but they expect him to be sold. It sounds as though he wants out. He also said Charlie Taylor has left for Southampton on a free. Jack Cork has left. Goodmanson left but came back on a 1 year deal after obviously one of the main incoming Scott Parker was hired. Um, he also says, I would not be shocked if Wout Weghorst, I would be shocked if Wout Weghorst did not leave and expect Mike Trezor to leave too. A few others could leave yet who don't seem to be openly pushing for moves. He lists their examples, including Berger, Odebear, and Amdouni, but he'd love to keep them. In terms of the key incomings, Fladkey, obviously very popular last season. He's coming from Ipswich. Chirande Sambo, right back on a free from PSV. He was more of a squad player for PSV, but could be in contention for Burnley. Lucas Perez, left back, about 2 million from Santos, played most of the season for Cadiz in La Liga. Um, Andreas Kuntunji is coming for about 4 million euros, striker signed from Con, 14 goals on loan at Rode at in League 2. And he reckons he's probably a project. He expects to bring in another keeper, maybe a left back. Otherwise, any more incomings would likely be to replace outgoings. And then he said, in terms of a likely lineup formation, he said it's very difficult to give an accurate lineup prediction at this stage, given that Parker hasn't been in the job long and as the preseason has been shrouded in mystery, being closed doors games other than leaked drone footage of a trademark Manuel Benson goal cutting inside and scoring from outside the box against Newcastle. Our squad and everything Parker's previous managerial roles suggest that it will be a 4-2-3-1. He's given his best punt at the starting 11, but he said there are plenty of spots in doubt. He's given a bit more explanation. We can cover some of them as well. But he has said in goal, Hladky, right back Vitinho, centre backs Esteve and O'Shea, left back Perez, uh, in central midfield Cullen and Berger, left wing Kolyosho, attacking mid Brownhill, right wing Odebear, and up front Foster. Just to give a couple of caveats there, Hladky, he's expecting Trafford to be sold, so Hladky would be number one. Right back, he said, just to pick a couple of these out, right back, he said he's not really sure. It could be Sambo, Roberts, or Vitinho. Left back, he expects Perez to start. Vitinho could play there. It's possibly a position to bring someone in. And the number 10 role could change a bit, particularly, say, if Amdouni stays. And he said he expects a lot of rotation in the wing area. So that's sort of, there are a couple of other things he says about these players, but in general, that's sort of filling in the gaps there. Thoughts on that? Obviously, there's been a lot of, they're doing the behind closed doors pre-season again, but
Yeah.
thoughts on Burnley?
Well, you've probably got to start with Parker. I don't know how good Parker is because he basically does what he has to do to get promoted, and we've seen him twice before with Fulham and Bournemouth have similar strength teams to this Burnley side, and he has got them promoted. Um, it's a massive squad. It's basically 3 teams, so it's going to get cut down. Some of the squad players will go out, probably like Obafemi, Masengo, maybe your Roberts and players like that, Twine. So it's just really tricky. Like, imagine if you're a fan and you can't even go and watch the games because they're playing behind closed door. I really don't like that. But we saw last year, not last year, time they were in the Championship, that they're going to have very good players. Whether Parker's going to be able to get the best out of them, as in attacking, free throwing, I'm not sure, but it might mean they're really good defensively. So maybe like if we find out if Perez is definitely playing left back and Sambo's playing right back, for example, then they could be really good options. But because we don't know the team, like how can you punt on any of these? Like
Yeah,
you can't, can you?
no, it's tough. There's certain sort of like I think if you're wanting to punt someone, like as in whoever it is, you have to go in full knowledge that you might get to like game week 1 or game week 2 and need to sell that player. That is the gamble you are taking. And that's fine, but it's just sort of being fully aware that
Yeah.
that is the risk you're taking with a Burnley player.
They also a mixture of fixtures. They obviously away at Luton game week 1. They've got Cardiff, Sunderland, Blackburn. So it's not terrible, but it's one of those you see Luton and you're like, oh, it's a tricky game. And then you throw in the fact that you just don't know who's going to be in the lineup. It becomes very hard. But look, you might gain on people just from taking a punt, and if you get on the right Burnley player, it could do really well. But yeah, I think overall Burnley will be fine. They'll probably be pushing the top 2, but it's tricky to go there.
Yeah, I do think, I might take a punt on someone, but I do think a lot of people will sort of that stint from Luton away in game week 1 to Leeds away in game week 5 and decide they're going to avoid Burnley for that length of time and then sort of go into them starting with the Portsmouth home game in game week 6,
Yeah.
which I also completely understand.
Mm.
But like you say, it's just that balance of you might be able to gain if you do go earlier, um, and working that out.
What do you think about the number 10 position? Because we saw, especially in Parker's Bournemouth side, that was the Phil Billing role. And if it is Brownhill, we saw what he could sort of do in that position in a company side, and it's a decent price at 7 million. Brownhill.
So that just feeds in nicely, actually. I was just looking at some of the stuff Chris had said about the assets, and he does sort of mention that.
Yeah,
But I'll just sort of go through some of the stuff he said there. So he's talked about Estevan O'Shea and the centre backs to start and being solid at 6.0. I do think there's the element there of like we're talking about some of these positions where it's less certain that particularly if you say you wanted a Burnley defender, there's your potentially your sort of like safest
yeah,
route to it. He said it could be routes to big hauls from the wide players, but it's difficult to predict. If Odebear is still there to start the season, he'd go with him at 8.5
yeah,
and drop to one of the others if he does leave. Um,
yeah. That's fair.
He also mentions Kolyosho and Zarori could be good assets. He would avoid Benson, who will get lots of minutes, but probably off the bench, saying he's more effective as a quote finisher than a starter. He said Foster should get hauls, but expect he will be managed and rotated at times. So at 10, I think there are better options from other teams up front. But in budget assets, he does say Brownhill and Berger could potentially be played as number 8 or as number 10. And if we keep hold of them, they should be starting most games. They'll get forward a lot, so at 7 and 6.5, they could be value. He also mentioned Pires could be the starting left back, so it could be worth a punt at 5.5. Um, under the radar, there's not too much there, but he said apart from those mentioned, Sambo at 5.5 could be good value if he gets the right back spot. I do think in terms of the Berger and Brownhill, I think if they're still there, you would expect one of them to play the 10 role, as Chris says, and I do think that is interesting. Brownhill essentially played in that role a couple of seasons ago, did very well from that role. I think it is dependent, I would feel like, on someone like Amdouni not being there,
Yeah,
which is the one thing, particularly early in the season, is another thing where it might be, hey, first few weeks, wait and see on Burnley, sort of thing. So it does sort of lean into that, some of this, where it's just like there are so many options that make it tough on any of these players, really. But like we've said, there is the element of, okay, if you pick one or two you like, you could gain on people.
yeah, I agree. Did
Um,
did he say the position?
he did acknowledge he's bottled it slightly. Said the squad
Uh,
is very strong, so they should definitely be in the top four. And then he said, and hopefully they have enough for automatic promotion, which I think is fair,
yeah, it's
particularly
fair, I think.
with where they are at the moment and the uncertainty as well. I'm not going to get too much into my Scott Parker feelings because nobody needs that. Um, at least the quality of Cardigan in the championship will be raised by Scott Parker being back. So that's part two. Um, we've made good time again. That's an hour and 13 minutes there.
It's good.
Um, hopefully you guys are getting a full sort of feel for these teams. Um, obviously we are massively appreciative to everyone who has sent us all the information for these. Um, by the time you've seen this, particularly if you've seen these on Twitter, I will have tagged as many of them as possible who have uh, sort of graciously given us information. But particularly if you have any follow-up questions, um, these are people that clearly know their stuff, and we would recommend sort of speaking to. But hopefully, we've been able to help, particularly translate some of it in Gaffr terms as well. We will be back with part three. I'm not sure whether I'll release these tonight or tomorrow, probably on Sunday, and then we will be recording part three on Sunday night. And then we will have all 24 teams previewed.
Yeah, so that they should be out Tuesday at the latest. Episode 3 might be Tuesday, so
Yeah, episode three maybe like episodes one and two will be out on Sunday. I would say they probably won't be out now because it's like 10
yes,
past midnight. Um, but they should be out Sunday, and then episode three probably Monday,
yeah,
but it might not be till late on Monday.
yeah. So you're gonna have something to listen to
Yes,
for a
we're
few
giving you
hours.
plenty to listen to. But yeah, all that's left to say is thank you for listening again and goodbye.
Goodbye.